new frame. We have to look at, we have to have a different future from our own perspective. And so when you look at, when I read this last line in this poem, or when you recited it, it said, bury me not in a land of slaves. So, you see, it was a vision, you know. Yeah. She had vision that this wasn't going to last forever. She already had seen that, you know. And I think that came from her having read the Bible, you know, and understanding religion and so forth. And also philosophy and so forth. But she was able to see that. And I think for us, what we use, how we use this information to begin to construct, or in the construction of our purpose and what we're going to do in the future, can be very, I think it's very important and can be very helpful.
Thank you.
Can I just interject something? Because what Apostle Hammond said was very important. Francis Ellen Watkins Harper was an exponent of Black liberation theology.
That's right.
It's a Black Christianity that is liberatory. There's Mariah Stewart, first woman, white or Black, to speak in public, who was very religious, very much influenced by David Walker, who was her mentor in Boston. She was the first woman, American woman, to speak in public. Very, very religious woman, but a firebrand. I mean, and both Watkins and Stewart identified with an African nationalism. Both of them talked about Ethiopia and African daughters and sons and stuff like that. I mean, they still identified with that in a very radical way. And I'm just wondering, you know, people like James Cone who write on Black liberation theology and whatnot, I have to go back and see, but do they recuperate these women? Not, I mean, we have a lot of different histories, but this Black liberation history or Black religious history, the history of Black Christianity, Brock, that talks about the difference between, huh?
Is it sexist?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I'm wondering. But I'm even wondering about,
some isn't.
huh?
Some of them do, some of them don't.
But I'm even wondering, well, where are the Black women historians in recuperating a Black women's liberation theology? I mean, there's people who, you know, and I know people in Chicago who were very, very socialist minded, were women apostles actually. I know the archive at Woodson Library, who has a woman in the 1930s in the Depression. She was an evangelist, and she fed the poor, and she was a socialist at the same time. I mean, but none of these, I'm wondering, I don't know, you know, I'm just putting it as a question. I mean, there is a liberation theology in our history that's very important, and it is a definite, deep criticism of white Christianity. I mean, we don't confuse that. That is what it is about. Right. And so I'm just wondering, she brings this up because she had a very personal relationship with her idea of God. And that's what she wrote out of that loneliness, right. But she flipped that script. Always, she flipped death into something. Don't bury me, I'm dead. Right. But she tore up white Christianity.
Yeah. Brother.
So, family, first of all, from accountability standpoint, I was at a UCAP meeting that I have to be at as an alderman or whatever, and it got a little heated with the police trying to brainwash our seniors. So I had to, I was on point. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a very serious situation they're going on. They go over there and try to just tell them what's going on. And I felt like it was just like, oh, we're going to take care of it. I was like, you know, why you sound like you talking to a 2-year-old or something? What do you mean? Like, you know, you think they just mentioning this stuff as an idea or something? They want you to do this shit. They do, you know?
Hey, don't get no whooping. I'm recording this. Don't get no whooping.
We got these cultural norms popping in.
Y'all ain't supposed to be taking the discussion.
We let it roll.
Oh, come on.
That's the collective part. You know we gotta take the discussion. But we take that as the spirit that needs to be here.
So I mean,
what you're giving us.
And I just y'all know it's important to me, so I wouldn't just be missing it, and I'm glad you called me. I was walking out of the place at that time. So going back to the point that you raised about struggling with Christianity and stuff, right? And so I have gone the full circle of blaming my parents, then blaming white folks, then blaming God, and running out of people to blame, right, for the situation that I find myself in. And I have, had long conversations about spirituality and religion with various members of my family. And when I was introduced to Black liberation theology, and I started to wrestle with that, I just felt like there are some aspects of Christianity, for instance, that I just couldn't never let myself be a preacher. I think I would be very effective as a Black liberation theologist preacher in this community, but I just can't do some of this stuff. I ain't baptizing nobody. I ain't doing nothing. I just can't do that ritual stuff, right? You know what I'm saying? And it really makes me feel like a hypocrite to know what I know about religion, Islam as well. When I started to understand about what aspects of Islam and how it affected people as well, right? So I'm just not in that space from a religious standpoint, but I see the power of it from the standpoint of you got a whole mass of people who come every Sunday to sit down and listen to you. And you have the opportunity now to share with them something that could be beneficial. So I struggle with that personally as well, that I see that I'm, as one might say from an old school tradition, avoiding a calling, right? But because I struggle so much with, how soon the other might, like, what you look at me. No, spirit, not that you particularly, but very, from a serious standpoint, knowing what I know, I just feel like that would be hard for me to do that. So it's a very real situation. And you all heard in the poem when I say that, are we supposed to pretend this stealing of our souls wasn't done by so-called Christians, right? Well, I changed it a couple of times when I do it. I say that by so-called Muslims, Jews, and Christians, right? You know what I mean? I can't let nobody off who are preaching and pushing a ritualistic, traditional, rigid religion as opposed to spirituality, right? So there's a lot of learning that we have to do in and what that impact is on our community. So I was just trying to share that personally. It's a struggle for me ongoing, but I love listening to Jeremiah and Dr. Cone and some of these Black liberation theologists, because it starts to hit home for me when I hear them,
Aaron, I really wanted you to be here because I had all this spoken word, because this is a spoken word.
All right, I'm definitely going to check it out.
So I want to thank you guys. I really enjoyed this. Lou has been telling me about this, the barbershop Thursdays, and I've been trying to get to earlier meetings, but I'm glad I could.
You was invited early on. Let's get the whole history. We ain't going to clip you. You're one of the first people invited to present.
I appreciate that.
Here at Speak.
And I'll come. I also think you guys need to do one on liberation theology and maybe give them some readings beforehand. And include Howard Thurman. I'm really interested.
Yeah.
Aaron, to your point that I think there's the religion, the rituals, the structure, but then there's also the spirituality part, and there are people that can kind of bridge that, right? So you have people that's their talent to do the rituals and to do all that, and then there are other people to make it real to people and to say, hey bro, it does this and this has been good for me. So I kind of feel that as you talk. So Wasulia had talked about being raised in Black culture. What's the young gentleman next to you? What's his name? Bryce. You did a fantastic job. I enjoyed listening to you, and you were very, very well spoken. Thank you. And so what I like about the black church, right, because I grew up in the black church, Lord knows I grew up in the black church, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, but even now, it kind of, just kind of ways that you think about things, I think it's been very helpful. And so I think one of the things that the black church does is prepare, or at least when I was growing up, right, like they would have kids come and do speeches, and they'd have them come, and it's youth day, right? So they would practice being leaders. They would look for their skills and talents. You're good at this, you do that. And so I think in a lot of ways the black church does that, and it encourages them, right? Like and that's why I did that, right? Because it lets them know what they do well, and hopefully something they can carry into adult, if not for structural racism and stuff like that. And also, so Sundiata, when you talked about how she was able to transcend. I love that word. I'm looking at black women in Chicago and how the violence is affecting them, and I listen to their stories and I hear how they talk about their spirituality, and that allows them to transcend. I also hear them talking about I was going to say something, but since the child is in the room, I won't. But I hear them talking about other things that's almost destroying them, to be honest. That's you know, that's really hard, and the loss of people. And then also, so when you look at Watkins, I think also you look at her uncle, right? The context in the school, and what he heard, what she heard in terms of him talking about liberation, in terms of what you need, and then she had her natural gifts, I think, to write and to speak, and those combined produced this powerhouse that you said went on through time, and even now, we're sitting here 2016, and we can get information, we can get motivation, we can get moved to action from her words. I think that's really powerful, and I'm thinking about how do we do that? How do we motivate the South? My focus is South Side of Chicago, but that applies to Champaign-Urbana. How do we motivate our black youth, our black adults, our black seniors, right, to really change social structures, to change the way things are happening? So I don't know. So that's a question that I have that I'm trying to work with my research, but part of it I do see spirituality and transcending, because again, there's so much pain, there's so much poverty, people are locked up, no money, all kinds of stuff, but people are still able to transcend and reach out and do something for the community, like I see in her work.
Which is a perfect segue of something I know. Did you?
I was just going to pick up this point. You know, I was fortunate to be brought into the movement by a couple of people, and one was a young radical minister, black liberation theologist. So I got to read most of the great works of black liberation theology at a young age. And what strikes me is that Cone always made the distinction between what he called salvation, that the church is about salvation. And he saw salvation as a personal thing, but also otherworldly. And then what he wanted to do was contrast salvation with liberation. That liberation was collective and it was immediate on this earth at this moment, right? And I think that's what we have to do, is try and dig into whatever religious tradition, whatever spiritual tradition, and unearth the revolutionary core that emphasizes collectivity, that emphasizes transformation, and that emphasizes, you know, liberation in its fullness. Not just salvation.
Thank you. One thing too, and I know we're running short on time, but one thing I really want to pull out of here, if we don't do anything else, is just talk about, because we all doing this stuff here and we're all busy, but the sheer volume of her work, like just how much she was doing and tirelessly, you know. So when we need to really think about that as we talk about, it's hard to get to all these meetings and all the stuff that we're all doing here. And when I see this too, I mean, it's really inspiring for me. Like, man, you know, really, this, you know, and we need to be inspired by this.
And when you mentioned the other day about last time about Du Bois, and it's still going through his material, it's still coming up in books and papers and so forth and so on. You know, so we have a lot
And
to
these
do.
people did work. I mean, they did work.
Yeah,
They did work.
I mean, this woman gave 3 lectures a day.
Right. That's right.
And they didn't have computers, internet.
And they said that the boys, that he was publishing, if you averaged out his work, he was publishing an article every 12 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's real, that's real. What time is it? We have, everybody in the group? Okay, okay, so we're gonna wrap things up now. Go ahead. You gotta take off? Okay.